Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Today's story is about a wrong hotel room, a guarded heart, and a love that found its way through the unlikeliest of beginnings. The city of Chicago shimmered under the evening lights, with golden reflections bouncing off gallery windows along the River North District. Inside the grand hall of the annual Contemporary Art Showcase, crystal chandeliers sparkled like falling stars, dancing on the polished marble floor. Among a crowd of artists, collectors, and press, Elena Rivers stood out in a sea blue satin gown, hugging her slender figure. Her long brown hair cascaded gently down her back, and her bright hazel eyes gleamed with confidence. But to a keen eye, there was a flicker of unease. At 28, Elena was a freelance illustrator and part-time instructor at a small arts academy in the city. Tonight, she was being honored for her collection, Reflections, a series of deeply emotional illustrations exploring solitude, loss, and hope. But the smile on Elena's lips was only a delicate mask. In her glittering clutch, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from the hospital, alerting her to new invoices for her mother's treatment. Stage OV liver cancer. Each notification landed like a blade in her chest. Still, Elena raised her wine glass and forced herself to keep smiling. Just tonight, she whispered to herself. Tonight, I'm allowed to forget. Around her, people cheered, hugged her, toasted to her success. But in Elena's mind, unpaid bills and late commissions spun like a storm. 6 months ago, she had flatly refused to collaborate with one of the country's top advertising agencies, Crossline Media, because she didn't want to work with their CEO, Daniel Cross, a man infamous for being sharp, cold, and ruthlessly business-driven. "We're looking for talent with depth and emotion," his assistant had told her. "And I don't work with people who only care about money," Elena had replied, eyes unwavering. Now, with debt mounting, her art studio rent due, and freelance contracts falling through, Elena couldn't help but wonder, had she been too stubborn? It was late. The crowd thinned. Soft jazz played in the background. Elena, lightheaded from wine and exhaustion, left the gala. At the hotel reception, she mumbled, "My room, Elena Rivers." The night clerk, likely weary from a long shift, handed her a keycard without double-checking. Room 1805. Elena took it, not noticing her actual room was 1804. She stepped into the quiet room. Didn't bother with the light. All she wanted was sleep, to escape the weight of her world. She slipped off her heels, unzipped her dress, and collapsed onto the king-size bed draped in white sheets. She didn't know that she had just stepped into the world of the one man she had once sworn never to cross paths with. Soft hallway light spilled through the cracked door of room 1805, brushing against thick velvet carpet and elegant furnishings. A faint trace of sandalwood drifted in the air, soothing and warm, inviting deep sleep. Elena slept soundly, her slender body curled slightly on the king-size bed, her tousled hair fanned across the white pillow, the soft sheen of her skin catching the dim glow. The satin dress had slipped off one shoulder, exposing a delicate collarbone. She had no idea this wasn't her room. At that very moment, a black SUV pulled into the driveway of the hotel lobby. Daniel Cross, dressed in a charcoal gray suit with his tie slightly loosened, stepped out, visibly exhausted after a long business trip from Toronto. At 34, he was the embodiment of control and success. CEO of Crossline Media, commanding global advertising empires. But tonight, all he craved was sleep. He collected his keycard room 1805 and rode the elevator, unaware that something unexpected awaited him behind that door. When he stepped in, he froze. A woman lay asleep on the bed, her blue satin gown stark against white sheets. Daniel narrowed his eyes, half suspecting some foolish prank by a rival firm. But as the hallway light spilled across her face, his breath caught. Elena Rivers, the same woman who had looked him dead in the eye 6 months ago and rejected a contract from his company without flinching. The one who accused him of caring only about profits. She was asleep in his room, unaware, unprotected. Daniel quietly shut the door, careful not to wake her. He sat down on the armchair by the window, loosened his tie, grabbed a soda from the minibar. But his eyes remained locked on Elena. Not sharp or defiant now, but soft, vulnerable, like a half-finished sketch not yet ruined by the world. He whispered softly, "You really do know how to surprise someone, Elena Rivers." Something about seeing her here, unguarded, peaceful, unraveled a part of him he didn't know existed. He didn't know why, he just knew he didn't want her to leave. Not tonight. Morning sunlight slipped through thick curtains, casting soft rays into the hotel room where Elena awoke with a dull headache and the rich scent of coffee lingering in the air. But what truly stunned her was the man seated by the window, sleeves rolled, crisp white shirt open at the collar, holding a mug of coffee and watching her. Daniel Cross. She shot upright, tugging her dress up over her shoulder, voice raspy and panicked. What is going on?" He merely shrugged, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "Looks like you slept in the wrong place, Elena." Her cheeks flushed crimson. She scrambled for her shoes, her tone sharp and accusatory. "You knew I was in the wrong room. Why didn't you wake me?" Daniel stood, moving closer. She backed up instinctively until her spine touched the wall. "I used to think," he said slowly, "that getting you to work with Crossline would cost me a fortune. Turns out all it takes is you walking into the wrong room." "Don't flatter yourself," Elena snapped, burning with a mix of shame and fury. "I'm not for sale, and I'll never work for you." She stormed out, breath ragged, as though she'd stumbled into a trap she didn't see coming. But a few days later, sitting in her tiny apartment, staring at hospital bills stacked like towers, Elena received an email from Daniel's assistant. A proposal. Join a global art campaign. An offer that could cover her mother's treatments in full. Elena hesitated. She didn't trust Daniel, but she couldn't let pride make her mother suffer. She typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, she wrote, "I'll join. Keep it professional." The following week, Elena stepped into Crossline's 28th floor office. Sunlight poured into the sleek modern space, reflecting off polished walnut floors and glass walls. Daniel sat at the head of the conference table, his gaze steady as she entered. "Elena Rivers," he said with a faint smile, "I honestly didn't think you'd show." "I need the money, not you." Her voice was flat, unforgiving. The meeting began. Elena laid out her ideas with sharp clarity. Daniel said little, but his eyes never left her. When their fingers brushed while exchanging documents, a small current zipped through her spine. She told herself to focus, to stay sharp. But his gaze, deep, unwavering, seemed to strip her defenses, layer by layer. And for the first time, what scared her wasn't Daniel, but what she was starting to feel. 2 weeks passed in a blur of relentless work. Elena and Daniel worked side by side on the global art campaign. Late-night meetings bled into debates about color theory, emotional messaging, and visual balance. They challenged each other constantly, yet, strangely, Daniel always kept her ideas, just refined them slightly before adding them to the final draft. "Elena, you're too emotional," he said once, pointing at a sketch. "And you're too cold," she shot back, arms crossed in front of the screen. Though they clashed often, Elena began to see sides of Daniel she hadn't expected. He listened, he defended his team, he even gently helped an intern who had spilled coffee on a draft print. The arrogance she once despised seemed to fade, replaced by something quieter, something human. One late evening, long after the office had emptied, Daniel handed her a mug of chamomile tea. "You work harder than I expected," he said, voice softer than usual, "but don't let me find you passed out again, like that night." Elena looked up, heart thudding. He was talking about the hotel. No teasing, no ice, just concern? "Worry about your own staff," she muttered, taking the tea and turning away, not wanting him to see the color rising in her cheeks. The next day, during a boardroom meeting, Daniel openly praised her design concept. "Miss Rivers has elevated this campaign," he said, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. After the meeting, he invited her to dinner to discuss further ideas. Elena declined immediately. "I don't mix business with personal," she said sharply. Daniel smiled, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Then why were you in my bed that night?" She froze. Blood rushed to her face. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her pulse racing. That night, back at her studio, Elena saw a message from Marcus Hale, her ex. "I heard you're working with Daniel Cross," the text read. "Be careful, you don't know what he did to your father." Her chest tightened. Marcus called. His voice was cold. "5 years ago, your father begged Crossline for support to save the family's print shop. Daniel said no. That's why your family lost everything." Elena sat frozen. She remembered her mother crying in the kitchen late at night, whispering, "What do we do now, Elena?" The next morning, she marched into Daniel's office unannounced. Her eyes were rimmed red, her hands trembling. "Is it true?" she choked. "You knew my father's company and still refused to help?" Daniel stood, his face unreadable, silence stretched. Then he answered, "It was just business. I didn't know your family was involved." Elena's voice cracked. "To you it was just business, but for my family, it was everything." She stepped back, eyes glistening. "I'm not blaming you for saying no. I just wish you hadn't been that man." She turned and walked out, tears falling freely now. She had thought maybe she could forgive him, but not after this, not anymore. 2 days after leaving Crossline, Elena hadn't received a single call from Daniel. She assumed that was the end. But one rainy afternoon, while sketching half-heartedly in her studio, a delivery man knocked and handed her a thick envelope. No emails, no texts, just a handwritten letter, strong strokes but hesitant in tone. "Elena, I was wrong to let my emotions take over and hurt you. I didn't know your father's company was involved in that deal, and if I had, I don't know if I would have made a different choice, but at least I would have thought harder. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know you changed how I see things. I don't want to win you like a contract. I want to wait if you'll let me. Daniel." Tucked inside was a simple logo design. E and D, their initials intertwined, with a note scribbled below. "If you want, we can start over, not as partners, but as something more." Elena held the letter, her hands trembling. She wanted to throw it away, but the tears had already started to fall. She folded the letter gently and slipped it into a drawer, her heart heavier than ever. The next day at the hospital, the doctor told her, "This month's treatment bill has been paid by an anonymous donor." Elena stood still. She didn't need to ask. She knew. That evening at the orphanage where she taught painting, Elena walked in and froze. The kids were laughing, and Daniel, dressed in a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, was playing basketball with them. No tie, no CEO, just a man, laughing freely. Elena stayed back, watching. When the game ended, Daniel saw her. But he didn't approach. He simply smiled. A quiet smile, no expectations, no pressure. Elena knew she wasn't ready yet. But maybe she didn't want to keep running anymore. 2 weeks after that silent moment at the orphanage, Elena received a short message from Daniel. 7:00 p.m. tonight, 28th floor. Don't worry, just a small surprise. She considered ignoring it, but something in her heart nudged her forward, just one more step. And so, at 6:59, Elena stood outside Crossline's 28th floor conference room. When she walked in, she froze. It wasn't a conference room anymore. The walls were lined with photos, her teaching kids to paint, her accepting her art award, and a blurry photo, her asleep in his hotel room that night, blue dress slipping off her shoulder, hair tousled, peaceful as a dream. "Daniel," she gasped, both flustered and mortified, but he simply stepped forward, holding out a small box. Inside was a simple silver ring, no diamonds, no frills, just 2 words etched delicately inside. "Let's rewrite." Daniel looked at her, voice low and steady, not asking for forgiveness right away, just a chance to rewrite everything from the beginning, with truth, with choice, with love. Elena didn't cry. She didn't say yes. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, tight, like someone who drifted through storms and finally found shore. A month later, Crossline hosted a charity exhibition for the orphanage. Elena led the event, wearing a simple white dress, hair tied gently back, her eyes shining as children ran past her paintings. Daniel stood nearby. He didn't need to speak. He just held her hand, firmly, quietly. A little girl tugged at Elena's arm and held up a crayon drawing, Miss Elena and Uncle Daniel. Elena laughed, pulling the child into a hug. That night, as the two of them stood on the gallery balcony, city lights sparkling below, Daniel whispered, "Thank you for not running anymore." Elena leaned into his chest and murmured, "Thank you for waiting." No fireworks lit the Chicago sky that night. Just two people, one hand held, one heart opened. And a love once offbeat now found its perfect beginning. A year later, Elena and Daniel's love was no longer the stormy melody it once was. It had become a quiet, steady rhythm written with understanding, sacrifice, and trust. One peaceful afternoon, in the park where they first held hands after a summer rain, Daniel knelt beneath a canopy of trees and opened a simple ring, gleaming with sincerity. "You were the chapter I never saw coming, but now I can't imagine my story without you. Will you marry me, Elena?" She didn't speak, she just nodded, tears falling into a smile. Their wedding was held by the lake, where the golden sunset kissed the surface of the water. The guest list was small, but every person there had witnessed their journey. Children from the orphanage carried flowers, giggling as they danced around Elena's pure white dress like tiny angels. Elena's mother, now stronger after a year of steady recovery, sat in the front row. She watched her daughter walk down the aisle, her eyes shining with joy. When the ceremony ended, she stepped forward, embracing both Elena and Daniel, then smiled gently. "I've seen your pain, Elena, and now I see peace in your eyes. Daniel, thank you for showing up at the right time. Love each other not just with your hearts, but with kindness and patience every single day. I don't pray that you'll never argue. I only pray you'll never let go." Elena held her mother tightly, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Daniel bowed slightly, then stepped forward, wrapping both women into a warm, quiet embrace. The sky was still. Church bells rang softly. And this time, love wasn't just a feeling, it was a forever promise. And as the final light of day kissed the lake's edge, one thing was certain: Elena Rivers was no longer alone. And Daniel Cross, at last, had found home. Not in a place, but in a person. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe that even the quietest moments can change a life, make sure to subscribe to Noah's Stories, where every tale finds its soul. Until next time, stay kind and stay open to love.